So having selected your test data, the question is now asking you to produce a report that will show which instructors are suitable. So here was the test data that we chose. We chose a minimum charge of £12 per hour, maximum charge of 17. We wanted weekends. We said any gender will do, and a minimum hours per week of 2. So what should happen is when we click on this button, it will run a report. What we actually need to do is have a query first of all, and the query will find the instructors that match our criteria here. So we're going to create a new query, and so we choose a query design. It needs to be based on the instructor table because we're getting it to show a list of instructors. So we'll add that on. And what we're going to do is we're going to put all the fields on there. Now we're not going to use star because then we can't manipulate the individual fields. The reason we're putting all the fields on is because we want to see all the information about the instructors. We're going to save this query before we go any further. I'm going to call it suitable instructors query. Now what we want to do is we only want it to list instructors that meet these criteria. So we're going to start off with a nice simple one, and that is whether or not they meet the criteria of working at a weekend. So if we go to the weekend and we look at our criteria, basically we either want it to be true or false. If it's true, it shows us those that work weekends. If it's false, it shows us whether they don't work weekends. But that data has got to come from this text box, this tick box here. So if it's coming from that tick box, we need to know what we called that tick box. So I'm just going to go back to design view and we'll have a look. Double click, and I called it WE tick. I may have referred to it as WE check before, so you might want to check what you called your one. So what we're going to say is whatever the value of that is what this will be. So it's either going to be true or false. Now to get that, we have to refer to a form. So if I start writing forms, it's going to come up with a list of forms. If I put an exclamation mark after it, it then gives me the choice of which form. We're using find instructors. And if I put another exclamation mark, it now gives me an option to choose any of the form controls. And there's WE tick. So if it's ticked, this will be true, and if it's not, it will be false. So what I'm going to do is run that query, that form. It's ticked. We'll run our query. When I run the query, notice it's now only showing me instructors where the weekend is ticked. If I go back to design view for that, we'll change this to be unticked, and let's run the query again. And now look, it's only showing me those that are unticked. So we now need to go through doing this for all the other fields. So we've got weekends. We'll next have a look at our charge, our maximum number of hours, but we've said we want a minimum number of hours. For example, we said we want a minimum number of hours per 2. So therefore, the instructor has got to be able to be willing to teach at least the maximum number of hours of 2. So for at least means it's got to be greater than or equal to. So it's got to be greater than or equal to whatever we selected for the minimum hours. So if we put in again forms, find instructors, and then have a look down our list, there's our minimum charge. And now when we run it, it's not coming up with anything. Okay, so we just need to have a look. That's because I put minimum charge, and I actually meant to put minimum hours. So there's minimum hours. Now if we run it, it works. Notice it's only showing those with 2 or more hours. If I change the data on there, the data in the query will change. So now let's have a look at the minimum charge per hour and the maximum charge per hour. So here's our charge. What we want is we want the charge to be between these two values. So I can just say between, and then we'll do our forms again. Forms, find instructors, and we want it to be between the minimum charge and the maximum charge. So we'll do this again. Forms, find instructors, and then we'll select maximum charge. So that's now saying it's got to be between those two values. Let's run it again because we want to make sure everything's working so far. Okay, we've only got them now between £15 and £17. It's all working really well. Okay, the final one that we've got to do is looking at what their gender is. Okay, so we're going to start off with our gender, and we're going to say here that this is going to have to be forms, find instructors, and then what's been selected in the gender combo box. So at this stage, if we were to try and run our query, we're actually going to find that it doesn't work. If we look at this, there's a very simple reason for that, and that is because we chose here a gender of any. Now, although this says male, female and any, it was actually M, F and star that was stored in this combo box because we had two columns. So when we look at this, what we're expecting this to be is star, which we want to act as a wildcard. Well, if we want this to act as a wildcard, we need to use like in front of it. And when we use like, it's going to say, it's going to be like M, well it can only be M for male, like F, that's only F for female, or like star, which means like anything. So if we run it, that works absolutely fine. Now we're just going to test, but if we change this back to male, that's M, and we run our query again, it does still work. So we'll just go back, change that to any, where we were, look at our query, and we can see we've got 7 records and they don't match our expected results. So we need to have a look and see why. So we were looking at 12, 17, and there we go, that's the problem, that weekends should be true. So if we go and do this again now, that's our expected results, and this is what we're going to need to create the report on. So we'll close that query down and we just need to create a report, and we'll do that using a wizard. So we do a report wizard, choose the query, not the table. Okay, add all the fields on to that query, to that report. Ignore this bit about grouping. Now, does it say anything about order? In this case, it doesn't ask them to be in a specific order, so we can ignore the order. But if it did, we'd need to be aware of that. Now, we're not going to go for tabular because we won't get all the fields across the page. But if we use what's called a justified report, we'll be able to put all the fields in here and we'll be able to include a picture. So it's saying here suitable instructors query, but we're supposed to call it suitable instructors report. So let's write that down and finish. And hopefully now we get a report, and if we go through the pages, okay, it should only be showing us those 6 instructors. There we go, that's the 6th one, 16, 13, 11, 13, 11. Go to the previous page and we've got 2, 5 and 8. So that's our report done. Now I know the button's not working, but you're not asked to get the button working, you're just asked to show evidence of a report. So we'll get the button working for the next part, which will be 3D part 4, where you've got to do a few extra things to show evidence of all of this working.